This bread was baked using my 177-year-old sourdough starter from the Oregon Trail. And this is the step-by-step process that I follow in order to make my artisan loaves. This recipe is for a double batch. If you want to just make one loaf of bread, cut the ingredients in half. Start by taking your active starter and mixing it in with some warm water. Once that's fully mixed, then you're going to go ahead and add in your dry ingredients. You want to mix all of that together until a shaggy dough forms, kind of like this. Once that's done, you're going to cover it and let it rest for 1 hour. It's okay if you go a little bit over. Once the 1 hour is over, then we're ready to do our stretch and folds. Before doing my first set of stretch and folds, I like to do the aliquot method. That's where you take 40 grams of dough and you add it into a 2-ounce condiment cup. For me, this is the best way to time my bulk ferment. Once you've separated out that dough, then you're going to stretch your dough up a few inches and fold it over into itself. Stretch and fold, just like the name implies, and you're going to do 4 total sets of this, spaced apart by 30 minutes. Once you've completed your stretch and folds, make sure you put your cup back into the dough and then cover it. You're going to let it rest for 30 minutes, and then you're going to do your second set of stretch and folds. Remove the cup, and then repeat the process. Stretch the dough up a few inches, fold it over into itself. Rotate the bowl until you've stretched the dough at least 4 times all the way around. Once again, you're going to replace the cup, cover it, let it rest for 30 minutes, and then do your third set of stretch and folds. Each time you do your stretch and folds, you're going to notice that your dough becomes more firm and has more stability, and there might be bubbles starting to form. That's all part of the process. It's okay if you don't time your stretch and folds completely right. It's still going to be bread in the end. This was my 4th and final set of stretch and folds for this loaf, and you can see that it is stretchy, it is smooth, and it has some bubbles beneath the surface. After your 4th set of stretch and folds, you're going to replace the cup, and now it's time to start the bulk ferment process. Cover your dough and let it rest on your counter until it's doubled in size, or for about 8 to 12 hours depending on the temperature of your house. You'll notice that the dough in the cup has also completely filled the space, and that's how I know that the bulk ferment process is done. Now it's time for pre-shaping. Make sure you flour your surface, that way the dough doesn't stick to it. You're going to take the dough out of the aliquot cup and incorporate it back into the other dough. It should be nice and jiggly, and it should come out of the bowl pretty much on its own. You shouldn't have to fight it too much. Since this is a double batch, I am splitting it down the middle to make 2 loaves. If you're making a single recipe, obviously you do not need to do this unless you want to make 2 small loaves. For pre-shaping, you just push the dough away from you gently and then tuck it back under itself until it forms a tight ball. Pre-shape both of your loaves, and then you're going to cover it and let it rest on the counter for 20 minutes. You might notice that your dough changes shape a little bit during that 20-minute process, and that's okay. Once the 20 minutes is up, you're going to do the final shaping. For these loaves, I tried something new with my second shaping. It's called the caddy clasp method, and essentially it's just folding the dough together and then making sure that it pinches together tightly. After shaping, you're going to move them to either a bowl with a towel that's been dusted with flour or into a proofing basket. You're going to let them rest there for about 30 minutes, covered, and then you're going to pinch together the seams. All of the shaping and the pinching that you're doing is helping to create stability for your loaf. This is what's going to help it keep its shape during the baking process later on. You can see here how the dough kind of came apart after it was in the basket, so I'm going to pinch the seams together. Now you have a choice. You can either do a cold ferment for up to 18 to 24 hours, or you can wait about 30 minutes and then bake your loaves. I choose to do a cold ferment. This particular loaf sat in my fridge for about 4 or 5 hours. The second loaf is still fermenting and will be baked later today. The longer the ferment time, the more sour the dough. Now you're going to dust the bottom with flour and turn it over onto a parchment sheet or even onto a silicone sling. Dust the top with a little bit more flour, and now you're going to score your dough. I like to use a little bit of twine or floss to create guidelines for myself just because I am trying to get it perfect. But it doesn't have to be perfect because it's still bread. These score marks are completely optional. The important part is the expansion score, which is a little bit deeper and goes across the entire loaf of the bread. I like to do an initial score, and then after my bread's been baking for about 7 minutes, I pull it out and I do a deeper score. The possibilities are endless for how you score your sourdough bread. You don't have to do a design unless you really want to. I forgot to mention during this process, you're letting your oven preheat. I preheat mine with a Dutch oven inside at 450 degrees. Once it's preheated, you're going to move your dough in, and then you're going to add 4 ice cubes before closing it up and putting it in the oven. I like to let it bake for 6 minutes, and then I pull it out and I do a deeper expansion score. I'm still working on my scoring, but this is just what works for me. After the 6 minutes, you're going to put it back in the oven for another 14 minutes at 450 degrees. Once the 20 minutes at 450 has passed, you're going to reduce the oven temperature to 400 degrees and remove the lid. Let it bake for an additional 40 minutes or until golden brown at 400 degrees. Let this cool on a cooling rack for a few hours before you cut into it, and boom, there you go. You've made a beautiful loaf of artisan sourdough bread. This was a gift for a friend, and I hope they enjoy it.